Ladies and gentlemen, do you feel like you're winning or do you feel like you're wasting your potential? Either way, the science behind the so-called winner effect is both intriguing and scary. Here's why. In a study on real-life traders in London, researchers found that just a few days of profitable trading caused testosterone levels to surge significantly by as much as 76%. And guess what? The higher the testosterone, the riskier and more profitable their trades got. But this wasn't just luck. It was biology. Winning changed their chemistry, and their chemistry changed their decisions. That's the winner effect. That's the winner effect playing out not in a lab, but on trading floor. In another study, they let two mice fight against each other. I'm sure you've heard of this one. Or compete for territory. They drug mouse B so that mouse A is pretty much guaranteed to win. So, what happens? The story doesn't end there. In the next fight, they don't drug mouse B, but mouse A still wins. What do you think happens here? And in fact, with a much higher probability because it had more confidence and more testosterone. If you think about it, it had more confidence, more testosterone, more wins under its belt. So it still feels too good to be true. If it does, give me just a few more minutes. Long and short of this story is, it's not just about the trader and mice. You see this everywhere. You see this behavior everywhere. It's a vicious cycle that shows up everywhere in life. The more you win, the more likely you are to keep winning. We see the same thing in athletes and even their fans for that matter. Studies have shown testosterone increases after a win even though they didn't do anything. They were on the sidelines screaming, yelling and singing Kumbaya. So their testosterone still saw an increase. You see this with rich people who keep getting richer and their money makes more money because their wealth compounds. The power of compound, right? One successful business somehow paves road for another one. So confidence soars and it becomes easier to attract better talent and all that good stuff. So sort of snowballing, right? Even the more primate behavior has this indicator. Men become more desirable when women already are into them. It's like social proof for attraction or something. So winning does quite a decent bit of things to your brain. And you'd most often see this in competitive sports or in a line of business where you're constantly expected to prove and provide. Winning a competition improves your biochemistry and cognitive abilities to win again. So, the summary of all that is winning does something to you. But, hold on. On the flip side, when things aren't going your way, you start feeling stuck, doubting yourself, and feeling like a loser. And that mindset, it makes you lose even more. It snowballs just as much as the other one that we just talked about. So, what happens? So, to me, the winner effect is very simple. You're either on an upward spiral or on a downward one. And it's all about momentum. So momentum's everything. And I think, if I'm not wrong, Jordan Peterson talks about this abstract concept in one of his books called 12 Rules for Life, where he explains the concept of counters to explain a very similar phenomena. So let me shed some perspective. This is my fourth video where I'm recording myself as opposed to doing pure voiceovers. And I spent a decent amount of money setting up my gig, buying a camera, etc., etc. You know, a lot of stuff that goes behind the scene. And I've sort of committed to doing at least one video a week. So here's the first half of it. Now, unfortunately, none of the videos that I did post performed the way I expected. And maybe that's even natural given the time and experience I have in this game. And maybe I just don't know how to narrate a story, whatever, right? You have to understand that the stakes are off the roof for me on this one because YouTubing is far left field for me. You know, you've got to understand. And why? I'll tell you why. I'm a trained engineer and maybe, just maybe, there are better ways for me to spend my time and craft my engineering skills or whatever, right? So that's what you'd think. So really, I can look at the weeks of time and money spent as a waste of time with absolutely no returns. Meanwhile, every other random kid on YouTube seems to be popping off. Quite frustrating, if you ask me. Jesus Christ in a handbasket, whatever, right? But hold on. But I can spin the narrative around and say, okay, my videos didn't perform, fair enough. And there's other aspects to it. I've learned a lot about this field. I've learned how to talk in front of a camera and, for instance, talk in front of you like this. And I stuck to my word and stood ground. And in this version of the story, there's a win. The winner effect is about how you read between the lines, and it's all about perspective and perception. It's your perception and your narration that can tilt momentum in your favor. So this is what winner effect is all about. The book emphasizes on developing a healthy relationship with results. How do you feel about the results that you got this year? We're halfway through this amazing gift of nature, so I want you to drop a comment down on how you feel. Personally, before I understood the concept and the applications of it, when I was in some sort of a negative spiral, I realized that I tend to forget all the wins that I've had up until then. So what should have ideally happened? What should have happened was I recalled and recollected my past wins. It's as simple as that. It's very easy to dismiss your achievements when you're in that downward spiral, and I speak from really first-hand experience here. And I think I drew some inspiration from a fellow YouTuber called Leon, who said he was a physical manifestation of the word mediocrity. I don't know about you, but I thought that was pretty funny, and I think even relatable to some sense. But anyway, I want you to change the narration slightly and resist that temptation to spiral down faster. I think it's very easy to get sucked into that whirlpool. So you spiral faster when you stack up evidence against you. That's pretty much what's happening here. And calling yourself a loser, a good-for-nothing lad, whatever, just stop. I mean, then one might ask, what evidence or narration to look for when you've got really nothing to show for? So how do you stack up the evidence in your favor, right? So if you're still wondering, what might one do? What do you really need to do? And this is what I want you to do. I say, celebrate the smallest wins. Did you get out of bed? Did you show up to the place even when it went against every fiber and grain of yours? If yes, use that. Say, I at least showed up. It makes a whole lot of difference, trust me. And I think it's a start to rack up evidence in your favor. Granted, it's a smaller evidence, but hey, you just have enough to make that claim that you can do what you set out you would do. I think there's an aspect of perception that we're missing here. So let me explain. Here's the thing, winning is very subjective, and your brain actually doesn't know the difference within reasons between what actually happened and what you think happened. I want you to think about all this for just a second here. So for instance, let me give you an example. I participate in Muay Thai. It's a form of martial art in case you're wondering, right? So I spar regularly, and as part of this training regime, most days I get smoked. I get smoked so hard because I'm not fast enough, my defense wasn't weak, I'm chubby, whatever, etc, etc, etc. But I actually spin myself a very different story. Trust me, I do. So I tell myself, hey bud, think about this. You showed up, you got to work out of it. You didn't get knocked out, and maybe could you have done better? Absolutely yes. But is that a complete loss? Hell no. You see, again, it's all in the narrative that you tell yourself. And let me give you another one. This was actually a beautiful thing, right? It's an interesting one. So there was this girl I eyed at work, completely out of my league. And one day I munched up all the courage that I had and actually told her that she's very cute. And, I actually said, hey, can I take you out for coffee? Blah, 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 blah. And God, she's beautiful. Anyways, so guess what happened? What do you think would have happened, right? So she said, yeah, no. So we got to talking and laughing for a bit, maybe even at me, I don't know, right? Who's to say? And I don't know if I could ask her how I did. Maybe she'll tell me that it was about me all along. Anyways, point is, I felt like I was going into the ring and fighting way above my weight class here. And I did it anyway. And that's the takeaway. In my book, that's a huge win, or at least it's my perception of how things worked. But hey, Karen, quick shout out, hon, if you're seeing this, do I get bounty points for self-humiliation in public? Anyway, so I don't know, it's all subjective. So the first way I think to tap into that upward spiral is by building the muscle of acknowledging your wins. And even if you have to dig, reiterate, or go scavenging for them, I think you should go do it. It's a great way for you to keep track of wins. And I think a great way to keep track of your wins, big or small, is to keep journaling them and write it, type it, whatever, floats your boat. But although I would say, put pen to paper. I think it's a very cathartic experience, and I think there's science behind that as well. But, note down 3 wins for the day, whatever, if 3, 5, it doesn't matter. Acknowledge the good you did, and you'll feel good about it. If you're wondering, yes, there is a loophole, a dark side to all this. You can start tricking yourself on the wins as well. So you kind of give your mind the impression of doing things, but actually not, completing them or seeing things through. And that's the dark side of all this. So, no show up credits always, right? You actually got to show up sometimes. And celebrating the wrong wins can actually be, more demotivating ultimately. So what does science say about all these things? So how do you actually keep yourself accountable, right? So what does science say? Rewarding yourself for effort is the best way to have sustained performance and maybe even improved performance. Think about this for a second again. So a healthy relationship with results is all about falling in love with the process and things you control. I think it's about taking a moment also to defining for yourself what makes this a win. So a win that's in my control to continue in some sense, rewarding myself for taking the right actions, if that made sense to you. So tying us to concepts that, was built very beautifully in another book called Power of Habits, and I think even Atomic Habits for that matter. So let me sum this up for you. I think that's too much information. So figure out a way to reward continued efforts. That's the key takeaway. How do you know when the effort was good enough? Good enough from the standpoint of, hey, I did everything in my control to continue marching forward. That's all. That's good enough. And that's the best way to keep yourself accountable, in my opinion. Of course, now, if you sit and lie to yourself, that's an epiphany we'll have to reach for ourselves here, but I think you get the point here. So what's always worked for me is to, I think, start small, start simple with simpler things, and things that get the ball rolling. It would be silly for me to kind of, talk to myself and say, hey, if and only if this video makes 100K in views, will I, reward myself? I think that's crazy. That's ludicrous, right? I'm setting myself up for failure here, and I'm never going to win that battle. So, if I get 100 views, if I get 50 views, whatever, it doesn't matter. If I even took the effort to, continue posting videos, irrespective of what the outcome is, I think that's a win. That's something that you got to reward yourself for. Maybe I'll just get that scone after all, right? So Tim Ferriss shared that in order to learn something fast and really well, you have to have early wins. It increases dopamine, testosterone, and your confidence, and then your motivation ultimately to practice more. So I think you build up more resilience, and you basically get the effects, or should I say, reap the benefits of the winner effect. Some science behind this, right? You might ask and rightly say, well, most meaningful things are harder to learn and conquer. You're absolutely right, 100%. Most meaningful things are actually hard and difficult to learn. So what you want to do in times like this is you want to have some sort of uninformed optimism. So what do you mean? When I say uninformed optimism, I mean believe in your story, believe in your narration, trust your gut, and I think you want to jump in with both feet. Basically, trust yourself. So have you want to have some of that uninformed optimism that keeps you going through these tough times. And I think most people fail 1,000 times before they can succeed once. And succeed because I think you and I are, seeing it. But that probably, if you think about it, wasn't the end goal from kickoff. I mean, it was a lot more time in the trenches and behind the scene, smaller victories that actually kept them going and, keeping them going till today. And that's as we see them today. So where am I going with all this? So big goals and ambition can be extremely daunting. So what you want to do is cut them up in bite-sized portions. That's really what you want to do. Take the small wins first, because you always eat an elephant one bite at a time. So get yourself some early wins in the game. Next up, let me know if this sounds familiar to you. I'm going to get these 5 things done today, but you only get maybe 3 or 2 of them done, and you push the remaining to the next day, or you keep moving them until you have accumulated this slog of tasks, and with time you tell yourself, okay, you know what? I'm really going to get everything done, but in the back of your mind, that's that little voice in your head that says, you know what? You're not going to do it. You're just going to sit and write down all these tasks, but you're never actually going to accomplish them. So whenever you make a commitment, to a challenge, a to-do list, perhaps commitment to yourself or a friend even, I think, and you don't keep it, I think there's a problem there. And the problem is that you lose trust in yourself and your word. The trust you have on yourself and your word is the most important relationship that you need to have. And when you break that, I think that's a big trouble. And I think that's really big trouble. And how much do so let me ask you this, how much do you currently trust your own word? So when you declare something, is it set in stone, or is it wish-washy and, you always come up with excuses to not do them? And now I want you to later think about all the people that you have in your life, and you can clearly differentiate those who keep their words from those who don't. So your word to you is the holy gospel. The whole idea behind, doing a 30-day challenge or a 75-day challenge is not necessarily just, to build a habit. I mean, that's a byproduct for sure, but it's also to, commit and, give yourself the ability to show that if you decide, you should be able to do it. Should you decide, you're able to commit and deliver. And that's a relation that you got to build with yourself. And I think it ties up very seamlessly to the other point that I was making on, you could sit and lie to yourself and, cheat the wins that, you need to show in this case. But, who's really the loser here, right? So bringing us to the next concept that I want to talk about, and, it kind of ties up very seamlessly to this aspect. So you've got to be real with yourself, right? So you want to play ball and just be fair to yourself. And, if you really think about it, nothing happens out of the random. It truly doesn't. So there's always a deeper play, and it's all about you being cognizant and you realizing of that fact. So what do I mean by all this? Why am I saying all this to you? Are you going to be rich overnight? No. Are you going to master meditation in 1 week? Hell no. Am I going to be, some sort of YouTube success just because I put this video out? Absolutely not. Hell no. But does it mean I'm losing? Also no. And that's exactly the point. What we want to do is to tame your expectations. We want to tame our expectations, and that's really something to pay attention to. So growth or decline most often, isn't as linear as one might think. I mean, going back to the concepts of spiraling up and down and so on, it seems like you're going around in circles, but you're actually either climbing up or you're actually descending. So don't go too crazy with expectations. You know what I mean? So if you don't manage expectations and take that small win, you're either playing very hard to stay where you are because it takes resistance and motivation to, hold still as well, or you're actually on the downward spiral and you just don't realize this because it takes a lot of energy. You know what I mean? So if you really think about all this, it's a beautiful concept. So I want you to take a minute here. So this final one, I believe, is the most powerful way to tap into the winner effect. It's used by Olympic athletes, the military, the SEALs, name it, they're using it. So this is taught as one of the 4 pillars of mental toughness, and I would say it's the most important practice that I was lucky enough to learn, sometime back. I started learning all this when I jumped into this whole self-improvement, finding myself journey, and I think I wanted to share this. It's important. So let me give you another small personal story to kind of demonstrate this topic a little better. Okay, so I recently moved to the heart of Canada, the city of Toronto, and I lived in a suburban city before where I was a master's student. I think I kind of gave you that story in the previous video. So now you've got to understand, moving here is a big financial decision. It takes a toll on your finance, and not a lot of people get to do it even if they wanted to do it. And I want to say I'm fortunate, lucky, I count my blessings and all that, good stuff, but there's more to this story than just mere luck. So every time I drove past the city, I saw these big buildings, the penthouse lifestyle and whatnot, and at the time, like I said, I was a student with $0 and minus $40,000 in student debt. And yeah, I couldn't imagine my wildest dreams, but I never would have imagined to land into one of these houses few years down the road. So what really happened? The seed was actually planted, and unknowingly, I think I worked a lot towards it. I kept thinking about it, and I apparently even was talking to my friends about it every time I crossed this place. And one day, boom, sitting here and I'm narrating the story to you. So here I am. I'm not saying you should take my word for it, but I will say this. Part of getting where you need to is actually in the conviction. It's in the deepest wants of it. So if you really want something and you're willing to spearhead that dream, the world somehow, I think, finds a way to make that happen and aligns you towards it. So I'm not trying to get all spiritual here. That's not the point of the video, but when you meditate over your wants and needs over and over and over again, your mind starts to align, it starts to align you to where you need to actually get going. And I think there's also science behind that. So, and one day, before you know it, it clicks. This is a true story. I'm the sitting example of it. I'm sitting exactly where I wanted to be. So you want to call it luck? I might want to change that narrative just a bit, especially because we've, sat through this whole video. Isn't that what this video was all about? I mean, it's definitely a very small example, but really, it's not that small if you think about it. So if you only visualized and celebrated your future wins with some sense and thought, imagine what the outcome would be, right? So let me ask you this, how would you feel now? And if you I want you to sit and visualize and then tell me how you feel about all this now. So if you carry this energy into your business or your career, your dating, your relationships, whatever it is, would you show up differently with this different intentions in heart? I think so. So I want you to put your thinking caps on and give yourself credit for actually kind of sticking this long. So until next time, folks.